So welcome to the presentation about Zowe Revolution and Beyond. We would like to follow up on the Houston discussion and keynote you had in the morning. You now have the high-level picture, and so we will be going into details. What does it actually mean? As for the presentation, I'm Jakub, and I'm the Zowe chair, and this is Domenico, who is going to be presenting with me, and he is a Zowe Advisory Council. What we will be covering the most important changes that happened with the version 2. So 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. We will be covering even the 2.3 that happened this Wednesday. So hopefully there will be something new, at least for some of you in the audience. And then we will also touch a bit what's coming beyond, what's coming within the V2, so in the next year and a half, and even what are the areas that we would like to tackle with the V3 that's coming in a year and a half. So this is the general topics, and we don't have the presentation.
30 minutes, not now.
Yeah. Okay, so we will talk about the presentation meanwhile. Maybe you will get some of the information twice. Does it work? Doesn't it work? Okay. So basically, within the Zowe, there are 6 areas, 6 squads that we will be covering. We will be covering Zowe API Mediation Layer. We will be covering Zowe App Framework. This is the web desktop, virtual desktop that, for example, Robert Blom was talking about today already. We will be covering the client-side technologies. We will be talking about what's changed with the CLI and what's changed within the VS Code Explorer. And we will also explore some of the incubators, a bit about Zowe Chat, but there will be more later in the session if you stay here for longer. And the Intellij Explorer that should help some of the developers that are more Java-based.
Our introduction is on what the Zowe LTS means. So back in April, version, well, usually we have, by plan, we have a new LTS version of long-term support release of Zowe every 2 years. When we introduce major customer requirements, that from time to time, they require even breaking changes. So we need to break some backward compatibility, and we do it at the boundary of the LTS. We had this version 2 available since April this year. And so starting from April this year, version 1 moved in the maintenance mode, what we call the maintenance mode. That it worked for 30 minutes before starting of the presentation. So the version 1 moved to maintenance mode. It means that now we deliver on version 1 every quarter, while on the LTS release, we deliver every 4-6 weeks without any breaking changes until the next version that is planned for 2 years from now, so in 2024. In the slide that you cannot see, but you can download from the website, we have a complete slide with all the links on the documentation that you can leverage to understand what are the enhancements. First of all, you can start from the breaking changes. There is a complete page on the website with all the breaking changes by component. And it is useful for the users, but even more for the extenders. Wow. Okay. Then you will see that there is another page with the new features and enhancements. Once again, by component. Then there is the list of bug fixes. Another thing that changed at the version boundary are the conformance criteria. So the vendors or whoever wants to extend Zowe and deliver a plugin, an extension for Zowe, they can apply for the conformance badge. And they have to respect a set of criteria to gain this conformance badge. At the version boundary, we are used to change and to make the conformance criteria more challenging every version, because we want to improve Zowe, but even to improve the ecosystem around Zowe. Finally, if you want to learn more about the Zowe V2, and there are plenty of office hours. So those are recorded presentation by component about the new features or the breaking changes that were implemented in the version 2. They are all available on the website. So it's intended mainly to have all the links of the documentation. Now, let's go to what's new. We realized that possibly you already know most of what's new in version 2, so we will go through the list quite quickly, trying to spend more time on what's beyond version 2. So the roadmap and what we think about having in version 3. So on the client side, the command line, what I would say is the most important enhancement is the team configuration. In version 1, every user has to create its own profile, has to know the host name, the port, and just in case you change the port, you have to change all the profiles that all the users have implemented. With version 2, there is the administrator that can create one profile, and then every user can just import it. So it is centralized, and it is more, let's say, enterprise-friendly as a configuration. Then there is even the automatic team configuration in case of you are already configure the API mediation layer. Another important enhancement is the daemon mode that introduces, let's say, it allows the command line to be so much so much better performing. It is because instead of spawn a new process every time you call a Node.js, there is a daemon process that is used every time. Another important improvement is about the security. It was a plugin in version 1. Now it is built in the command line. And so, for example, it's no longer possible to have the user ID and password in plain text, but it will be managed secure way by the command line. And then there are a few new commands added for the ZOS files and ZOS jobs. On the explorers, basically, we mimic what we made already on the command line. And so there is the support for the Zowe team configuration for profile management. We refined the Zowe Explorer settings to follow the VS Code standards. We removed the need for the secure credential settings because now it is managed in the command line, as we said before. And we added the refresh capability to pull in configuration profile changes as needed.
Okay, the next area we will be covering is the API mediation layer. One of the key capabilities of the mediation layer is the authentication. And there are some enhancements that came with version 2, version 2.1, version 2.2, and 2.3. So first of them is personal access tokens. We all know that none of the customers wants to store credentials anywhere. We also know that the public key infrastructure that's part of the client certificates is painful to deal with, regardless of how we would like this to be different. This is always the case. And so that's why we are introducing with 2.3 the personal access tokens. Basically, if you are using GitHub or any other solution like this, you already know this. It's a token that you generate, and you set a very specific scope that you can use it for. In our case, for example, you can generate personal access tokens that will say, you can only use ZOSMF and not the other services, and it won't allow you to use any other service. So this is the easiest way how to provide the kind of like credentials for your pipelines without having to have the certificates or having to have the actual credentials anywhere. So this is first important improvement that you will get. Second important improvement is mainly used for the integration with other services. Already in version 1, we supported the client certificates, like you could use a client certificate to authenticate and get the token. It's useful, it's great, it helps plenty of use cases, but it's not good enough. Lots of the toolings, like used in the observability solutions, like Grafana, for example, are able to provide us to authenticate with the client certificate, but can't do the workflow where they provide a certificate and they get the JAR token and then use the JAR token. So what we did is that for the services that are onboarded to the mediation layer, you could use the client certificate for any endpoint that you want, and it will translate it to what the other service understands. So if you have a service behind that accepts and understands pass tickets, it will get pass ticket. If you have a service that understands the JAR tokens, it will get the JAR tokens. It's just not the concern of the service anymore. It's the API-ML's problem. And the last things that I still think it's more of a distant future, but within the TSS, RACF, and ACF2, there is a concept of self-identity tokens that are kind of like JAD tokens, but for mainframe world. It contains the scopes, and they are safe, and all the 3 ESMs are able to work with them. So we already do have a support for the SAF-IDT in Zowe. You can, as a service, say, hey, I want to get a SAF-IDT token, and we as a mediation layer will provide the SAF-IDT token for you. So these are the main improvements in the authentication area. The other area that we've invested quite some effort in the last time, so again, 2.1, 2.2.3, is the API catalog. The API catalog, ideally, at some point, is going to become a main portal where you can get all the information about everything API-related that's living in the mainframe. It already does this for the APIs that are part of the mediation layer, part of the Zowe, and for the APIs that are conformant. What you get out of box is you get the basic documentation, the possibility to try out the APIs that are part of your infrastructure. What we added as a part of this is we added the possibility to see the code snippets. So if you as a developer are coming there and want to directly use what you see, I think that at the moment we provide 10 different languages that you can just take a look and grab the code and use it in your application without doing anything else. And we do this for any application that provides valid Swagger, so validly is onboarded to the Zowe. So if you have your own infrastructure APIs that already provide the documentation in the Swagger format, you just onboard it and you get all these things in free. So this is, I think, rather important extension that's coming in 2.3 for the developer experience. Apart from that, we changed the look and feel, so it doesn't look so much outdated as it used to. Well, it still looks a bit outdated, but it's a bit better. But it will improve over the time. And apart from that, we also know that one of the common problems that were happening when the users were authenticating to the mainframe is that their credentials were already expired, or there was some other problem. So the API catalog now provides a flow where it understands the problems that the SAF is providing, and when SAF says, okay, it's expired, it directly takes the user to the screen where the user changes his password the same way as it would be done in TN3270. You just don't have to go there now. So I think that these are the main improvements around the developer experience. There is one more that's more linked to the system operators, and that's the improved onboarding of your services. So again, if you have your own infrastructure APIs you would like to get to the API mediation layer, the catalog provides the wizard that will guide you through the process of doing it without having to really understand the internals of what's going on. So, and the last changes in the API mediation layer is that we've provided another way how to extend, because so far we are talking just about the services that are communicated with the mediation layer. That was the only way how you could extend the API mediation layer before. But it's also now possible to write the code that runs as a part of the mediation layer. So if you have a Java code that you would want to run on the Tomcat server in the context of the API mediation layer and interacting directly, code to code, this is possible now. We already have some extensions that are doing this. And the last one is an infrastructure improvement for the high availability. That's like a common use case when you are moving Zowe to production. We use caching service for some of the applications within Zowe. And as of 2.2, we are supporting another backend provider that stores the actual data. The good part about the infinite span as a storage provider is that it doesn't spawn another task, and it just lives within the context of the API mediation layer, and it works on platform as well as on off platform, so easy to work with. Some enhancements that happen in the Up framework. Up framework, if you are unaware, it is a virtual desktop that I think Robert Bloom was talking about other applications and extenders that can create and provide the applications within this virtual desktop scenario. And with the version 2, there are like 3 main things that I would like to highlight. One of them is that IP Explorer is part of the default suite. So if you want to know what's running on what port, on which of your IP addresses within the LPAR you are running on, this is how you can get it easily from the UI. And for the USS Explorer, it's finally possible to download the file directly from USS from the browser. You don't have to go there. And within the JS Explorer, there's just some minor improvements. another component that it's possible that you don't even know. It lives somewhere within the internals of Zowe. It's actually a pretty useful component because it's a pluggable C server that you can, so if you are interacting directly with the system and you need to write some C code and you don't know how to deliver it and how to run it and what to do with it, ZSS can help you. ZSS is basically this, like you can create extensions that will be installed as part of Zowe that will run in the context of ZSS and can use the infrastructure as part of it to interact with the mainframe directly in the C code or even high-level assembler. We use it to implement the pieces that are not in the OSMF yet so that we can actually use it. For example, SAFIDT is implemented in ZSS. One of the major improvements that is coming with ZSS with 2.3 and in 2.4 as a default is the config manager, which should really speed up the starting time of the Zowe v2. And that should gives you the opportunity to use Parm libs that you are already used to from other solutions to configure Zowe instead of just using the Zowe YAML. And the last area, and I would say this is the area that saw the most change between V1 and V2, is the installation process. And it was encapsulated in the fact that we introduced the ZWE command line tool that you run on the server and you do all the common tasks that you want to during the installation and after the installation. So basically Zowe CLI, but for Zowe itself on the USS. And this is last piece from the client side from me. It's Intellij Explorer. You already know the VS Code Explorer. So if you are using VS Code, you know that there is tooling from us to access the mainframe and so on. And the IBA and the squad that they created within the Zowe provided now the same tooling for the IntelliJ-based solution. So IntelliJ IDEA, WebStorm, PHP Storm, and so on. So if your developers are in love with this tooling, we finally have a solution for them as well on the client side. And back to you.
Yes, another incubator that will be the focus of next session, so we'll not spend so much time, is the Zowe chat. So with this incubator, we are adding another interface to Zowe on top of the command line, the Explorer, and the desktop to interact with the ZOS resources through a chat tool. And you will see more in the next session. Next incubator is a Zebra, and this morning they gave a great session on it. It's a parsing engine to convert RMF data in JSON format, so you can store, for example, in a MongoDB and make analysis on top of it, or you can import you can have a dashboarding in Grafana using Prometheus, and as I said, there is even a demo. You can even play with it. Just look at the Zowe.org website for the Zebra incubator. Coming.
Okay, so these are the things that should come with V2. So in the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months, it's taken from the Zowe roadmap. If you want to see the roadmap in another format, we will be discussing, and Mike Dubois will be showing it on the next Zowe quarterly webinar. You will see more detail and more information there, as there will be more time for it. But let's go at least quickly of what we are expecting. First area is about the CLI. When I'm talking about CLI, it's the Zowe CLI tool as such, but the Zowe CLI is also responsible for the SDK, so software development kits that the users that want to leverage Zowe CLI functionalities can use themselves. The first one that we have is in Node. So as a Node developer, instead of calling the commands via Zowe's-based datasets and so on, you just directly use the APIs that are provided within the language. The next one that's coming is the Python SDK. Why Python? Because it seems that there are plenty of mainframe developers that are now looking at Python as a potential complementary to tools such as Rex, JCLs, and so on. And so that's why we decided that Python is the second best choice at the moment to look at. We are continuing to improve the credential management, and we believe that there is a use cases for CLI to be running on the mainframe and accessing and doing stuff on the mainframe from mainframe. So another area that we are looking at is to make sure that Zowe CLI will properly run and fully run on the USS. I hope that we will get this soon. And the last piece is to provide the containers that will contain the Zowe CLI installed and configured to be used in your infrastructure easily. Some amount of things that are coming with the explorers. I'm mainly talking about VS Code Explorer here. Most of it is relatively small developer experience improvements. The thing that would be relevant for vendors is that we are looking in ways how to improve the extensibility of the VS Code Explorer, because right now there are lots of limitations what you can and can't do if you want to provide your own extension on top of Zowe VS Code. We want to change this. Basically, we want to allow you to integrate more deeply with the actions that are happening within the VS Code. We want you to be able to react and provide lots of hooks that can give you the possibility to react on the right events that are happening within the mainframe and that are happening with the solutions that you were looking for through the VS Code Explorer. What we hope will help is the different waves of notifications, because we know that some of the operations within the VS Code take quite some time, because, like, for example, you download lots of data, you download this syslog that has like 0.5 gigabyte or 2 gigabytes. It takes a while, and then meanwhile you want to do something else. And this how notifications done now, you can easily miss that this is actually happening. So we want to make sure that you don't. Do you want to talk about the roadmap for chat, or should I take it? Okay, so within the chat, we will learn more about the chat in 8 minutes, I guess. Again, extensibility is a big thing. Zowe is an infrastructure product, an infrastructure project. So we don't expect Zowe on itself to provide an immense amount of value. Of course, it's gonna provide you with some value, but the main value is in others being able to leverage Zowe, being able to depend on Zowe being there, and then provide their own functionality on top of it. So we are looking really at the platform level capabilities, and Zowe Chat wants everybody to be able to leverage the communication with the mainframe, communication with your services, and communication with everything that's happening on the mainframe directly via chat, because we won't resolve it for all the services ourselves. We will give the framework, and then if you want, I don't know, Endeavor to talk with, then the Endeavor developers needs to do some work, but then you will be able to communicate with it. Apart from that, we expect to integrate with the Zowe API ML more, so that you can get some amount of the chat functionality directly by onboarding the service to the API mediation layer. How far we will get, we don't know yet, but that's definitely a plan. And we want to improve the way how you can get the notification of what's happening on the mainframe, and provide a way and the tools how you can hook into this information and do some stuff based on it, either in chat and maybe even in general. So within the API mediation layer, there are few key areas we are looking at. I would say the most important one right now is the identity federation. Because so far what we can do in API-ML is to use one of the basic methods that we were talking about and translate it to something else that the services on mainframe understand. But now we are looking at figuring out how do we leverage for some of the customers the fact that they already have the user within the SSOs, like Okta, Active Directory, and stuff like this. And they want to be able to give them some very limited access to the resources on the mainframe. But they don't want to create the mainframe ID for everyone. And identity federation may be one of the solutions to this problem. It may solve other problems as well, but this is one of the use cases that we are looking at right now. Another one may be that the user is living with the large sixplex, and within the large sixplex, they have different rights across the different LPARs, across the different sixplexes, and we want to handle this situation and the problems that are associated with on the API-ML instead of the client services having to go this route. Apart from that, for the extenders, we want to help them validate that the conformance criteria that they claim are actually really fulfilled. It will be more important with V3 as they are gradually tightened. And we want to help with the understanding of the infrastructure later on by really, truly dynamically discover what's living in your infrastructure. Like currently, you still have to onboard the service to the API/ML. Even either the services do it themselves because they already have the knowledge, or you do it statically. But the goal here is to put API/ML in the infrastructure. The API/ML will look in what it is, and everything that's eligible will be onboarded directly. So this is the goal there. So with the app framework, there is one key development that we are working on, and we are already having some POCs, and that's App Store. So you already know the app stores like in iPhone and Android and so on. So we are wanting to bring something like this for Zowe. The main goal here is to simplify the installation of the extensions and applications that are depending on Zowe. So we do it for ourselves. We need to install our extensions within our pipelines, and we need to verify things with them. And on top of that, it could also help all the vendors to make it easier to get their extensions to Zowe. Once Zowe is installed, it should be as easy as 1 or 2 commands to install, uninstall, and do all the stuff with the extensions. Apart from that, we are still usually living in this one sysplex. We rarely have right now supported with Zowe like a multi-sysplex environment. And one of the key problems that we want to explore within the app framework and then also within the API/ML is how do we handle multiple sysplexes that have a different rights, that work differently, and make sure that we also provide the correct routing. So when the customer, the client wants to do some action, it understands correctly where it should go for like resolution of this action, instead of like the user having to say always, hey, I want to go here really, and know what the here means. And this was all for the V2, and I will talk just very briefly around like the large topics that we are looking for in the V3. V3 is gonna come sometimes mid-year 2024, most probably around April, but it could be a bit sooner, it could be a bit later. The date is not exact yet. And there are 3 overall topics that we are really wanting to improve on by then and then in the V3. And it's the hybrid integration. Make sure that the Zowe plays very nicely within all the hybrid cloud setups. It's easy to use for the new generation of the mainframe developer, as well as for the current generation of the mainframe developers, and the old generation of the mainframe developers. I would say also the dead generation of the mainframe developers, but I don't think they are going to use it anymore. And the other topic is the artificial intelligence. Like it's probably going to manifest itself first within the chat, but the API mediation layer as the key gateway to the mainframe will have plenty of data around the patterns, and understanding what's happening there and whether there is some risk and some problem is going to be an important part of the overall Zowe tooling. And the last thing is we are still looking into new means of interaction, so maybe soon you will see Zowe Multiverse or some other cute word that would mean nothing. And I think that's it for us, and we are just in time. So thanks everyone for listening. I hope you weren't bored, and I don't see anyone asleep, so that's good. Thanks.